Hey guys, this is AC Lockheed with Disruptor Manufacturing, and we're up here in the tank loft at our facility where we store all of our tanks. I just want to tell you a little bit about our Disruptor Manufacturing tanks. Come on and follow me over here. It's all tanks, love tanks. We're going to stop right here. This is part of the tour that we do at our facility. If you ever come down here to Sanford, Florida, we talk about tanks. Now, there's nothing sexy about tanks except for the fact when tanks are done well. So I just want to show you a few things about our tanks that make them unique to us. Now, you're probably like, okay, how can tanks be unique to you? Well, first of all, I want to make the point that we own all of our rotomolds. All of our stainless steel rotomolds for all of our tanks. We designed the tanks for our use, for our equipment, to fit our frames. Okay, these are all our intellectual properties that we own. We own the molds, we own the designs, we did it all ourselves. This is our stuff, okay, our intellectual properties. We put them together to work as a system together, to be able to be mounted next to each other, particular capacities to particular standards, and I just want to talk about a few of those standards. So when you look at some of our tanks there, and we keep this up on the loft here as an example for everybody that we bring into the facility. It was several years back ago when we started manufacturing our own tanks. We do use a vendor that's a rotomolder that we've given our molds to, and they hold on to those for us, and they are a contract manufacturer for us. And so they have the rotomolding machine, we have the molds. They go ahead and do the plastic and rotomold them for us and deliver the product to us. And so for a while with our tanks, we were having them molded. This is one of our early tanks here. And if you'll notice, you'll see a little bit of a color difference between this 50-gallon Disruptor Manufacturing tank and this 50-gallon Disruptor Manufacturing tank. You see just a little bit of a difference between the two in the shade. So you'll notice this one's a little darker because light is penetrating through it. And then this one is a little brighter of a white, okay? Got a good high definition camera here. You should be able to see this. You know, even if I take it, I put my hand up against it here, you can see through the tank and see my hand. You see my hand right here? Okay? If I go over to this tank over here, I put my hand here, it's a little harder to see, okay? So this tank is thinner than this tank, and you can really feel it here on the neck of the tank, how thick the material is. After our first year or so of rotomolding these tanks, the manufacturer came to us and said, man, you guys bought a lot of tanks from us. We're ready to give you your next price break on the tanks. And like a lot of companies would do, we'd go, great, give us that price break. We'll have more profit. We'll be able to sell the tanks cheaper. Give us that next price break. We actually did something completely unorthodox. We said, no, don't give us the next price break. We said, actually, we'd like our tanks to be a little thicker. If you were to take the price break you were getting ready to give us and put it into more material in the tanks, how thick could you make our tanks? And they said, well, actually, let's run the numbers. When they ran the numbers, they said, we could actually make your tanks twice as thick, 2 times thicker than this is the industry standard, and this tank here is the thicker tank. And if you actually look at the edge of the lip here, you can see that this lip on the tank lid neck is thinner than this one here. There's a considerable difference between the size on these. So this is before we decided to make our tanks twice as thick as the industry standard, and this is after. What that did for us is it made our tanks structural. So when you actually push down on this tank moves and shifts, and you can feel it gives. This tank does not. It does not give. So that gives us the ability to take our tanks and, for instance, like here's where we added nuts and bolts to mount a pump to the tank. We can come in and do some other things like here. When we're doing bulkhead fittings, you know, you do your normal bulkhead fitting through the tank, but sometimes we can actually come in here, and if you get in there nice and close, you'll see that this is actually threaded. We're able to come in, drill a hole, and then go ahead and use a die, and we can thread the tanks because they're so thick. And what that does is that gives us the ability to direct screw fittings into the tanks and them seal. The tanks are so thick that you can actually thread the tanks. A few other things I just want to point out to you guys is you'll hear a lot people talking about DOT certified tanks. The DOT doesn't get into certifying tanks, but the DOT has a standard. So there's Department of Transportation for the U.S. laws, okay? And then the Department of Transportation enforces the laws, but they do not have a certification arm. It's just like OSHA. There's the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1972, and then there's OSHA, the administration that enforces the laws. But they don't get into approving safety equipment or certifying safety equipment. They have a standard that they enforce. So does the DOT. So the DOT standard for tanks is you cannot put chemical in a tank that the chemical reacts with or breaks down that tank. Okay, you can't do that. The second thing is that, for instance, you can't take a water tank and make it a chemical tank. Okay, you can't do that. Something else is that the tanks have to adhere to a standard. One of the standards is the DOT has what's called a time date wheel that our contract manufacturer actually stamps into our tanks. So I'm going to grab this smaller tank because it's an easy way to show the example here. And you'll see right here in the corner, you'll see branded into the tank. And I may have to kind of shift the tank around so you guys can see it there. Okay? Is a time date wheel. That's basically the born-on date for this tank. And this says that this tank here adheres to the DOT standard for tanks that go on the motor highways that carry chemicals. This is not a water tank. And they actually burn that in or brand it into the tank. So one of the things that was happening is because our tanks, this tank was thinner, whenever they would brand that into the tank, it would sometimes perforate or penetrate the tank. It would create a leak where they did that brand in there. Well, one of the things through making the tanks twice as thick now, you never have to worry about that burning through the side of the tank. But to have a DOT tank that meets the standard, you've got to look for that brand on the tank. The other thing that we do here, and I'll grab, is the tanks by DOT standard have to have the capacities on them. So you'll see molded right into our tanks there, and you'll see I'll shift it around so you guys can see it there, is the actual capacities in gallons and in liters for these tanks, because we do sell these tanks in countries that are on the metric system. The other thing is, and how you know these are our tanks, is right here. You'll see the Disruptor Manufacturing logo embossed. So if I turn it kind of on the side here, you can see it really well. The Disruptor Manufacturing logo, that is actually made into our molds. So when you make a tank off of our molds and it pops out, it has the Disruptor Manufacturing logo onto it. Again, one of the things that we upgraded several years back ago is we did molded in necks for tank lids to where we're not cutting a hole and installing a tank lid, so that when we have our tank lids on here, they seal completely. The other thing that we do here is we do have lanyards for our tank lids that help you from losing the tank lid once that goes in there. It's got a lanyard on it. The other thing we have is we have an air gap right here that allows the tanks to be sucked down. So when a pump's sucking from it, that little ball will depress or get sucked down, allow air into the tank. But if the tank sloshes or is being filled, it's a one-way air check valve there and doesn't allow anything to come up through the lids. And then also too, we have a rubber gasket on our lids so that when they screw down, they seal and nothing sloshes out of these tanks. You don't get chemicals sloshing out of your tanks all over your trucks, which is a great thing. But these tanks are very robust. One of the other things we do, as we do with a lot of our stuff here at Disruptor Manufacturing, is we give you a lifetime warranty on these tanks. Find another company out there that gives you a lifetime warranty on the tanks. Nobody does but Disruptor Manufacturing, because we stand behind our equipment. Because nobody builds better than Disruptor Manufacturing in the agricultural or cleaning spraying industry. Hey, if you're interested in these tanks, give us a call at Disruptor Manufacturing or check us out on the web at disruptormanufacturing.com. We'd be happy to take care of you and give you the best, sell you the best tanks on the market. Again, this is AC Lockyer. Go forth and prosper.